provide here in services for adults at the library, please feel free to reach out to me. You'll most likely find me up on the second floor. It's typically where I am. So for this evening's program, I would like to introduce our speakers. So I'm going to begin by introducing Barb Barton. Barb is best described as a Renaissance woman. She is an award-winning author, singer-songwriter, and filmmaker. She is also an endangered species biologist and wild foods gatherer. Barb is the author of Manoomin, the story of wild rice in Michigan, which I've got the library's copy here in my hands that I'll be returning after the program is over tonight for other people to check out from the library. But in addition, Barb does have some copies of her books here for people to purchase. This book won the Michigan History Award, a Michigan Notable Book Award, the American Library Association Choice List of Outstanding Academic Titles, and Independent Publishers Bronze Medal. I would also like to say that the research in the book that Barb wrote was also the foundation for making Michigan go ahead and declare Manoomin to be the state native grain officially. Barb has been working on the conservation of Manoomin since 2009. All right, and our second presenter for this evening is going to be Tara John. Let me just get to my page. Thank you. Right. So, Tara John, and I apologize in advance, I'm going to try my very best here. Kachi Wikwidong Anishinaabe, Indigenous femme of Grand Traverse region and enrolled member in the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, a social and cultural activist, ecological advocate, and eternal knowledge seeker. Tara has filled many roles within and on behalf of Indigenous communities all over Turtle Island, known as North America. While researching, working with, and implementing Indigenous land management techniques, she has most recently found herself serving in the capacity of traditional agriculture educator, and ceremonial foodways instructor in her ancestral homelands of the Three Fires Confederacy, modern-day Michigan. In carrying the focus of global sustainability and the knowledge of environmental abundance, she values the reclamation of Indigenous responsibilities as elemental caretakers and the reestablishment of Native communities in their intended role as full stewards of the lands entrusted to them. Thank you so much, Barb and Tara, for joining us this evening, and I'll turn this over to you now.
Welcome everyone, and Tara, I am so excited to be able to do this talk with you. I have not had the opportunity yet, except with Roger occasionally, but to actually have a tribal person here who can speak to the cultural significance, because this is your rice. This is like so sacred and so amazing. So I am very happy that you're here.
Miigwech for being here. That's a lot of what I do and how I move is, this is my backyard. This is what I'm responsible for taking care of. So when there's a guest here that knows something, yes, we're going to share some knowledge.
Yeah.
Miigwech for being here.
Yes. So we're going to present this together, and which I think is absolutely awesome. We're going to be talking about Manoomin, which in the language means
great grain, the pinnacle of grain, the bestest grain.
Ever. We have two kinds of rice here in Michigan, lake rice and river rice. And I wanted to share just a little bit about the ecology of Manoomin. This is, of course, the lake rice. Notice how short it is compared to the river rice. The river rice can grow up to 12 feet tall. Here's a close-up picture of the river rice. This grows in the southern part of the Lower Peninsula primarily, and it's pretty rare. So it's listed as a state-threatened species. So that basically means that only tribal people, and I don't know how it's all worked out, but the tribal people can harvest, but non-tribal people cannot because it is protected. And Manoomin has this amazing life cycle, and I'm going to let Tara describe this in the language because it's so beautiful.
Maktigan, Manoomin. It's when it starts to shoot out the little tendrils and go and grow, it busts through that little coat and it shoots down into the ground and sucks up those nutrients. Zakakemilad, Zakaki Magad, Ojibik. And that one means the root. Like it really sprouts the root and starts to go up. Zakakim Agadun Ojikaban. It grows just like corn. It's a miniature version of corn, and it shoots those little feet down, and it kind of settles in. Baba Mangong Menomis. It starts to float on the top there, and then Ani Gakiwan, Ani Bihiskwa. I can hear the language better than I can speak it, and I will tell you what it means, because that will sound prettier coming out of my mouth anyway. When it starts to float on the water, it has this beautiful like hair quality, and it's lime green, and it waves back and forth, but it's a way to read that flow of the water, and that's what it kind of refers to. And then we have this shoot up, but this refers to the whole plant, this whole thing, from the root to the very top, and it refers from like the seed even, from being a whole thing. You pack the lunch and it goes off from its mom. So this refers to all of those things in that one word, and that it shoots its roots down, and it exists in all three planes, under the ground, in the water, and then when it's fully mature, it's in the air. So these words speak to all of those different things, and respect that. Thank you for bearing with me, guys. Thank you.
Here's some photographs that show Manoomin in those various stages of its life. And right now, the seeds are down in the sediment. Now, remember, this is an aquatic plant, grows in the water. It's a grass, considered a grass. And up in the upper right, you can see what we in the science world call the floating leaf stage, and a lot of tribal folks do. That beautiful hair that is just incredible. But like people, it doesn't have very deep roots, right? Like children, they're starting to grow in life and put the roots down.
To be protected.
Yes, and if you think about a boat coming by when the Manoomin is at that stage of its life, it's very easy for that to get dislodged. So this is a time when it really needs to be protected. Then, of course, we have the flowering stage, which is generally later in into July, and then the seed stage when it's in later August. Is that about right timing for where up here, August and September?
Yeah, if you time it right, you can get all the way from August to the very beginning of October.
Yeah. So Manoomin it provides so many things. I kind of think about its place on the land here and in the water as a forgotten thing in Western world, in mainstream world, right? Like the prairies of Michigan. We don't remember the prairies. They've been gone for a long time. We had huge beds of rice at one time, and they disappeared long ago. And so they're out of our collective memory. The European side of this, okay, they're out of our memory. I call it ecological amnesia. When you don't remember something that was once so abundant, you often don't put as great of importance on bringing it back. Thankfully, the tribal people know how important Manoomin is and are at the forefront. All the tribes are leading right now in bringing this back.
That's one of the things that I actually work in, is that traditional ecological knowledge, because when you live within that cultural perspective, it's almost like having a codex to these things that you see in nature, or like the secret message behind these stories and these folklore you can look back on, and I can trace literal physics, astrophysics, all of these different things, ecological relationships and how they should be, how animals behave, and how to work that pattern through all just that cultural perspective. It's one of the reasons that I actually carry this guy until he comes back to the waters. He is the other end of this Manoomin, and he's ancient. This is that sturgeon. Over 200 million years, his body's remained unchanged. So he remembers who we are, even if we forget. And it's the same thing with this rice. It was carved out as a home for us.
Yes.
We have to take care of it.
Yes. So Tara's going to tell this beautiful story of the migration and why Manoomin is so important to the tribal people here. And miigwech for sharing this.
Oh my goodness. Don't ask me about my hyper-focus. I will keep you here for hours. This is beautiful to me. Ani Buju, hi, hello, Tarajan Indigenous Cause, Madwe Kwe Indigenous Cause. My government name is Tarajan, but I'm also known as the woman that speaks the language of the wind. Makwan or a bear clan. Real old ways, we weren't born into a last name family. You were born into a clan system, and that meant working alongside your parents or your aunties and uncles to find your best fit, how to serve your community, and what you were going to do to take care of your people, what you were best at the elbow and screwing up, getting corrected. So that was the clan system that worked out through that system. Kachiwi Kudang and Dojaba, being again, in lieu of a land acknowledgement, welcome to my home. We call it around the Great Water, and that means from the peninsula all the way around to the other side. We named all of the places along our stopping routes. All of our places actually are named after the water and how it's articulated around that space. For two main reasons is because those are our interstates. If you have a crossroads to where you're going, you're not going to get lost. And then two, even in the language, that is the base of what your community is. Where you find yourself and where you go from there is the base of you as a human, and that is what's needed to be taken care of for that community to thrive. So, in all of these beautiful things and these old things, I actually can travel back today through this migration route and talk to my friends out on the Shinnecock Nation, Long Island, and understand the words that they have and see these reflections and echoes in the salt water of the things that they're taking care of on that end. And I can see almost a mirror reflection of us over here, their baby cousins. Because it said that when Creator put us here, we were the last ones to be here. We're essentially the most pitiful because all of these elements and creatures and ecological puzzle has to exist and co-evolve and form these relationships back and forth, the elements essentially, for us to even be close to existing. We were placed all the way over to the salt water. Bimose is what we say. And you walk softly, but with intention. We lived there for quite a while, happy and engaging, and then we got a message from someone that was a visionary. Some people say she was a pregnant woman, but she got a vision that we had to go. I think of it like the monarch butterfly, because he wakes up after just restacking his whole body inside that cocoon, and he stretches his wings out, and he's a completely different being. And he's like, buddies, I gotta go. I gotta peace out. Why? I don't know. I gotta go. And he goes, but he's never gonna see the end of that. And he knows that. It takes 5 generations. He's just going for better, and he's pulled in a way that he knows is right. And we say that's what we did all along this migration route, because we were even handed a prophecy along the way, directions, if you will. Like, if things go bad, this is what you should do. You're still loved, and you're still taken care of, even if life gets difficult. So we already had that, and we knew that. You move differently in the world when you know you're loved and taken care of. You don't go running out of the grocery store thinking your mom left you there when you turn the corner and she's not. you know that she's coming back. She's right there. And that's what we had all along this migration route. We did get lost going back and forth here, but up and around. And each one of those came with a prophecy that we can tell at another time. But you can even see Wawiatinong, the curved waters, where the curved waters meet. This is one of our, Walpole Island is one of our farms. You can even see in the way the water articulates around that and drops all that sediment, rich in nutrients, in the way it's shaped. And all along that migration route, we were told that I'm making a home that's just for you, and there's going to be an awesome present in there, like a housewarming gift. And if you take care of it, it will take care of you. And we're told that as the glaciers receded, that grain was deposited, right? Okay. Thank you. I should take you with me everywhere. But it was deposited along there for us. And we made a home where this grain is. So you will know you've come to your home when you find the food that grows on water. We found that there, and we were pulled there to be taken care of there. Each one of these spaces that we had deposited families and what are now tribes, they trace back to the same space, but they have ceremony fires there that I can go to over here in Bad River, that those embers have been burning since pre-colonial times. Since before this was America, those same embers from that same fire have been going. That's Ishkure. That's your heart fire. It keeps the community warm. It's a beacon home. We light our fires for our people when they're going home, like coming here from new babies, and then going home, like when you leave this plane. Both are beacon fires. So these are all of those awesome ones that are along the migration route that lead us to any place where the food grows on water, but we have to take care of it. It's almost, a lot of what I talk about is relationality and a perspective. So I totally hijacked your talk here.
That's what
And they'll deposit you back in with the cool facts. It's almost like you have your mom is your mom, but she was also a woman before that. There's a whole story about who she was. You might not ever know anything about her, but she's a different woman. And someday she might be a grandmother. None of those things are different. They are layered, and they are all part of who she is. And she has other relationships with other people. When we can move into a place where we can take care of this together and see both of those relationships, I am down for that, because that's when it's going to start to come back. If you have more questions, I'd be happy to talk, but I was just depositing a perspective here, how we got here.
I so appreciate that. It's super important. I don't think that people who have roots primarily from Europe have a similar life experience and connection with the land like the tribal people, indigenous people everywhere do. We did it one time, historically. But I think this is so important in understanding why we should be protecting and restoring and conserving and preserving Manoomin for the next 7 generations and beyond. Simply out of nothing else, but out of respect for the culture.
Like anything beautiful or invested in, you don't have to love it, or it doesn't have to be your thing to appreciate all the work that's gone into taking care of it or creating it. Indigenous identity is so bound up in culture, language, territory, family, community, history, that the denial of any one of them, any one of these factors, can have traumatic effects on an individual's identity and sense of self. And that's Pamela Palmatier. And further than that, ellipses, the generations thereafter, because they are then recovering from the lack of care. This I absolutely love, because our foods aren't just foods. Anything that you ingest, anything that becomes part of you is considered a medicine. And we have to be cognizant of that. Another hijack here. Most of the world's corn is yellow dent number 2, devoid of nutrients. It goes to feed. There are supposed to be 480 varieties at least, and all these different kinds of corn, and they're beautiful. It grows just like grain? Okay, I was making sure because I see the same structures
Yes.
and I see the same relationality. I just make sure that that is what I'm looking at, right?
Tara, I see the same thing with the river rice. To me, it looks like anorexic corn, right? It's got a skinny stalk, but it's got corn-like leaves. And for when I first saw it, I thought, is that corn? It does. It grows very similarly.
It does. There's actually one of the women that I took out on to meet the rice. She grows ancestral corn, Dene Nation, down in the dry parts, but she went out there first time and she's touching the rice and pollinating just on instinct. That's what it looks like and that's what it feels like. So I'm going to hand pollinate that grass. But all of these things are incorporating each other. One of the things that I was wrapped up in here before I tried to switch over was trying to prepare a space for our sugar bush, our traditional sugar bush, taking it back to listening to what the land wants and what the land needs. Because once we make that connection again, everything else is going to cascade down and we'll be able to take care of ourselves. When we can feed ourselves, we provide ceremony because it's a space to check in, laugh together, build those relationships. And all of these things support each other. And that is our culture. Those are the things that are of value that we're going to take forward if we can continue to do so and take care of these things. So that is why I work in food sovereignty.
And we know how delicious and nutritious Manoomin is. And a lot of times when I do talks, people will ask about buying rice. Where do you get rice? Where do you get rice? And I always talk about paddy rice versus the true wild rice, okay? So paddy rice has been domesticated from our wild rice. And there are 9, last I knew, they have 9 different varieties. And when they created these varieties, they selected for traits that are best for agriculture and harvesting and commercial sales. They did not select for traits that would help the rice growing in the wild. And so we never want to have the agricultural varieties growing here, because if those traits got into the wild population, it would be devastating for those native plants. How do you tell the difference? Well, the easiest way right now is price. If you're in the UP driving down US 2 and you buy rice and you pay $9.99 for 3 pounds, you're buying paddy rice. If you look at the rice and it's all long, black, and shiny, you're buying paddy rice. This is a photo of 2 bowls of rice, Manoomin, side by side. Paddy rice, true wild rice. Cooking times vary. I know it takes 45 minutes to an hour to cook the paddy rice and 20 minutes or so for Manoomin, the true wild rice. But it's so versatile.
I was going to say, I would argue that even rice from different beds cooks at different times.
Yeah, and has different flavors too.
It does.
It has different flavors. But it's so versatile, right? You can mill it into flour, you can make
Overnight oats, you can
breakfast.
do energy bars. I do little hunter cakes with the broken pieces. And
Yeah,
yes.
there's so many things you can make with it. Nutritionally, this is for 1 cup, for those of you who don't like grams. And nutritionally, it's got a lot of protein in it. You can't beat it. You can't beat it.
No, it is the sustaining one, that grain that we can build ourselves.
And it
On top
sustained your
of-
people. I mean, that was one of your main food sources.
It is the anchor for our home, yes.
So when I first started and learned about Manoomin was back in 2008. I started working with a friend of mine, Roger Labin. He's from the Lac View Desert Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, up in the western UP. And he started having wild rice camps up there. And it was to essentially try to return the tradition of ricing. Mostly in Michigan, in the upper and lower peninsulas, this tradition had kind of gone by the wayside for reasons that could take a whole hour to talk about, but cultural disruption due to the boarding school era, putting people on reservations away from the lands that they traditionally were on, etc. But these camps were to give these teachings back to the communities. And they taught how to do harvesting. They taught making all of the tools, which you can see some of up here. They were fantastic. We had, I think, 3 up there and a couple down at Tubbs Lake. And now almost all the tribes have their own rice camps or have families that are out ricing again. In just since 2008, and some people were doing it before then too that I'm unaware of personally, but I know from stories. But it's just really risen, and it's fantastic.
I kind of explain it as like when you feel the bass in a parade in your stomach, and like it starts to build. I guess I feel like that's energy that she's got.
Yes, yes. So we're going to demonstrate how you harvest rice in a minute, but I wanted to share that you do it 2 different ways if you're doing lake rice versus river rice. These are some folks from Nottawasapi Huron Band of Potawatomi down in southwestern part of the state. And look how big that rice is. So to get the grains, to harvest the grains, you can't harvest it like you do lake rice, right? Imagine a plant 10 feet high, and you're using a ricing stick. We got a couple of ricing sticks here. Do you want to be the knocker?
I'll be the knocker, yeah.
Okay, I'll be the puller. Pretend this is a push pull. So let's start over here. I will push pull you across the room.
Okay.
So I'm push pulling the canoe. We're going through the rice bed. She's pulling the rice plants over the canoe and knocking the grains that are ripe into the boat, okay, into the Gma. This works really well with lake rice. Say that one more time.
I always thought you like knocked it into the water and scooped off the water.
No, it goes into the canoe.
It goes into the canoe. It shouldn't float on the water. When it's ripe and ready to seed, it actually dives down. But that's the cool thing about this relationship with us, is that when you hand harvest, you're reseeding your bed because it does naturally go over the side.
Yes. But if you imagine a plant this tall and she's pulling it over, the seed head goes to that person's canoe over there. So it doesn't work very well. So they come up with different
You
ways.
sit different in the canoe depending on the canoe, face the
Yes.
person.
Yes.
Some people go on one side all the way down and then push pull the other way back.
Yes, yes. So we can pass these ricing
Yes.
sticks around if you'd like to see them.
Those are done out of cedar. There's all kinds of ceremonial reasons that but she guides us home that cedar, but she's also rot resistant. You can still see these dock poles all over through here.
Yeah. So we have,
They stay nice and
clicker
light.
here.
Lightweight is a big deal.
So you can see here, this is a historic photo from, again, not the Nottawasapi area. And they're using these long push poles. And at the bottom of the push pole is usually a prong. And that helps to gain purchase in the sediment and push you through. But you always want to be very careful to not damage the plants or the roots. Because the seeds ripen at different times, you can come back through every few days. But again, you want to be very careful.
Think about how like a natural apple tree will ripen and you can go out and pick a few and then come back if you treat the tree right and pick a few the next day. If
Exactly.
you don't go through with the tree shaker, you can still do that here.
Exactly. So here's my friend Kelly and friends Kelly and Daisy, and they're on Tawasa Lake, which is our largest rice bed that we have now. And they're going through, and you can see that Manoomin is not very tall.
I can hear this picture, you guys, because when you're sitting in that canoe, you have a whole layer of audible pollinators, just zzz, and you can hear it differently if you stand up or sit down.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
So I love this part, when you start to get a certain amount of Manoomin in the bottom of the canoe or the Gman, it starts to look like fur. And you can sort of see that here.
Reminds me of when I was little and I pushed the grain down on the couch one way.
Uh-huh. So then it's set out to dry in the sun. The whole goal, of course, is to get the hulls to dry because that in processing, that's what you need to remove their jackets. And then you parch to dry the hulls and the grain even further. And this is a parching paddle. Again, these tools are made out of cedar. And I don't know, when I parch, it takes me 15 minutes or so for a batch about that size, but it depends on the material of the container, it depends on the Manoomin, where it came from.
Your fuel, like what kind of wood you use.
Yeah.
Depends on how hot your fire is.
How well it was dried in the sun.
There's all kinds.
Yeah.
You gotta get to know her.
Yes.
I go by the way it sounds when it starts to hit like a fingernail tap.
Yeah.
On there, I'm like, oh, we're getting close.
I was taught by Charlie Ba that he taught us to take a grain and twist it between your fingers. If it slips off real easily, like you do a bunch of them to make sure they're all doing it. And if we want, we could pass some of this around. You've got some here too.
I do.
This is parched rice, so feel free to
This is
try to get
before it
the
gets hull.
hulls off if you'd like.
It's just like the corn. It has that hull around the side, and once it's parched, the inside part will get that hard outer shell, that brownish shell, that skin, so that you can then peel the corn cob, if you will.
And then you have to get the hull off, so traditionally you dance on it. And as you can see, you always wear moccasins. These are some ricing moccasins here. They're only used for dancing on the rice. And you do this beautiful twisting motion, like the twist, on the balls of your feet. It's a workout, for sure.
The whole body workout, because you're essentially just rubbing those hulls off without crushing the grain.
Yes. And then you need to winnow it to get all that chaff. And usually birch bark is used to make winnowing trays. This was done by Terry Fox from Lac Vieux Desert. She's Roger's sister. You can pass that around. And then you check it every so often to see how many grains of rice are still holding on to their jacket. I'm cold, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And then this is my favorite part, the final cleaning table. Up there it was so great because the elders were there. Mostly it was elder women who were cleaning. Sometimes you get some kids, but they were telling stories and laughing. They hadn't seen each other for the whole year, and it is just a wonderful time. Have you had that experience too at the camps where you're just sitting there with
That's when
listening to
the
the
life
stories?
happens and you can feel that ceremony settle in. You're with your relatives. You can hear that laughter and tell those stories and
Yes.
argue together.
This is cleaned rice
I got-
that's been through the final sorting process. So when we got done with, well, I should say we got done with first rice camp, I started asking myself, where is Manoomin and why have I never heard of it before? I'm a biologist. I've never heard of this before. So I started searching. My goal, however crazy it was to find every location of Manoomin that ever was and that is in the present. So I met with all the tribes. I talked to elders, went through herbariums. I went through everything I could think of to find information on Manoomin. What I learned about was that there had been 13 archaeological sites where Manoomin had been found, and these sites were over 2,000 years old, found in cache pits, and they mostly found what are called phytoliths, which each plant has a specific phytolith signature. I took all these locations that I found, made them into dots on a map. Now this looks like nothing, but I can tell you this is over 10 years of research to get these dots.
When you couple it with the stories that I know about everything, you can see them happen over this land here.
Yes.
It's really cool.
Yes, I would love to talk with you about that even more. The historical locations, what I want you to pay attention to are the coastlines of the Lower Peninsula particularly. See all of the dots there? Those are all mostly river mouths. And if you look at the map on the bottom, there's hardly anything left. Now this is a living map, right? Since these maps were made in 2018, the tribes have all been doing a lot of work looking for rice beds in their areas, and more have been found. But at this time, only 6 of the historic sites were known to occur today. So that tells you how many we
It's
lost.
the equivalent of what I akin to like a scientist grabbing a glass of seawater and looking at it and going, yep, there's nothing alive in there.
So we had at one time some enormous beds of Manoomin. Houghton Lake, many of you I'm sure, or most of you have heard of, had a bed that was over a mile long. And this again is from European literature, not from any of the tribal stories or knowledge, traditional knowledge. Saginaw Bay, 10,000 acres of Manoomin. 2,000 acres at the St. Clair Flats, which is near Walpole. The mouth of the River Raisin has a Monroe Marsh. It used to have a Monroe Marsh, 5,000 acres of rice, gone. And Detroit River was full of rice. All along Lake Erie was full of rice, all gone. This is, as I said, the largest bed we have now. Tawas Lake is about 700 acres in this photo.
And miigwech, the tribe to Gun Lake specifically, for allowing access for so many indigenous hands to be out there and loving this rice and inspiring so many people to take care of it.
Yes. So of course my next question is, what happened? And this was very hard to do, this research. It was so depressing, I can't tell you. It's hard to talk about it even. But it was clear to me that this story was common across the lower and upper peninsulas. And this is in a timeline. So around the 1850s, when the logging era started, they started originally, just like with European agriculture, people plowed with a horse, and it went slow. But over time, they started developing more technologies, like this big wheel, so they could deforest more quickly. They built railroad beds and drained wetlands to put the railroad beds through. I have a documented place near Saginaw where they put a railroad right through a wild rice bed. And then, of course, they ran the logs in the spring, which was tremendously damaging to everything that lived in the waters. Think about the young Manoomin plants when their roots haven't taken hold yet, and you have something like this coming through in the spring.
I'm a terrible assistant. I'm just like in awe of all these slides.
And then they would stack the logs on the shore as well. So there were water quality issues. This reminds me of the Lorax. This is a floating lumber mill. And what they did was saw the logs, debarked them, everything in the middle of the river, and just dumped all of the debris from that wood. This is Muskegon Lake, and this debris is from the lumber era, where they dumped right into the water. They're actually working on cleaning this up now, but it literally changed the quality of the water. So that was the first hit. Then they started putting in the dams to help facilitate the runs of the logs in the spring to create reservoirs. My friend Roger, who I mentioned, he's from Lac Vieux Desert. This is Lac Vieux Desert. The state line between Michigan and Wisconsin runs right through the lake, middle of the lake. And down here is the headwaters of the Wisconsin River. And there's a dam right there that was built in the 1870s. That's the old dam. It was built and rebuilt. This is what it looks like today. It's still that concrete structure. That rice bed was a traditional homeland for his tribe, and the people relied on that rice not only for sustenance, but also for income. The lake was almost covered in Manoomin. up until the dam was put in. It raised the water levels and drowned all of the rice. Almost all the tribal people had to leave that homeland and move into Watersmeet to find work because of the loss of that rice. So think about that, how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years they've been harvesting and fishing.
Articulating these beds into a home, into
Yes.
this is a beacon for, this is my grandmother, this is where I come to go home.
Yes.
And then that is suddenly ripped away by the exploitation systemically, because
Yes.
we can follow it, economic development of industrialization inland, and they strip by strip exploited those resources and shipped them out.
Yes. Speaking of industrialization, you take a turn around the 1900s and you start to see industrialization happening. The example I use is, again, the Monroe Marsh in Monroe, Michigan, and the River Raisin. This was also a big problem in the Detroit River, of course. The Monroe Marsh was an international destination for duck hunters. And I think it was 14 rich guys, not from Michigan, came and bought that marsh and then said, no trespassing, this is our duck hunting area. In the early 1800s, the Army Corps of Engineers decided it would be a good thing to start dredging all of the mouths of these rivers to facilitate shipping of all of the goods that were starting to be created up the rivers. And I'm going to be sacrilegious and use this stick as a pointer. This, where am I here? Okay, so this is the River Raisin. See all these beautiful islands. This is all marshland. And this is an island that was occupied by the Potawatomi and the Shawnee people. 1835, Corps of Engineers comes in, slices the island in half with a channel. This is a map done in 1900 during a high water period of the Great Lakes. All of this red is mapped wild rice. I overlaid this drawing on top of a real map of today. It is very precise. And when the water levels are high on the Great Lakes, the rice beds are smaller because it likes shallower water. So if this would have been a low water period, you would have seen red covering most of this marsh. Now look at it, 1962. They've straightened it out even more. You hardly see any islands left. The marsh is slowly disappearing. And this is what it looks like today with the rice beds overlaid. DTE's power plant. This is what was the island that the Potawatomi and the Shawnee lived. This was 5,000 acres of wild rice.
I don't know if you guys know Zug Island, the industrial Zug Island that was actually an ancient ceremonial burial ground, and now it's a sacrifice zone that you can't get out there unless you work there.
Mm-hmm. And this happened at the mouths of almost all the big rivers here in Michigan. So then they decided draining was going to start happening. Now we had draining happening during the logging era a bit, but there were two things that kicked off the draining. One, there was an epidemic of malaria, and this pink area is where it was hitting hardest. And back in those days, they had no idea, where did malaria come from? They didn't know. Malaria. Yes, this is the boundary of where the malaria epidemic was. But they knew that it was connected to swampland, right? Because that's where people got sick. They thought it was dead animals. They thought it came from dead, decaying plants. They thought it was a celestial phenomenon. They didn't know, but all they knew is we have to get rid of the water. So they started digging ditches, and it was deemed a public health crisis. They even had cartoons out to help protect yourself from malaria. Around 1903, I think it was, 1906 in Europe, they discovered that malaria was spread by mosquitoes. And then they figured out, oh, if we put oil and gasoline and kerosene on the surface of water, it'll kill the larvae of the mosquito and get rid of malaria. And so they started spraying. And you can imagine how well that did for Manoomin, as well as a lot of other plants. A second draining that happened was a result of a new farming practice that people who were coming here from Denmark and that part of the world called muck farming. I'm sure you've all heard of muck farming. Muck farming was done to grow root crops, carrots, celery, you know, that kind of stuff, turnips, onions in particular. One day, Frank Edwigijic, who's from Little Traverse Bay Bands, he's the tribal elder there, he called me and he said, hey, my people have stories of ricing in a lake in a little town called Grant, and the lake's not there anymore. What do you know about it? And I said, I don't know yet, but I will find out. Here's Grant down here. I had the Library of Michigan. I had the Library of Grant, Michigan. I had the Archives of the State of Michigan. Everyone's searching for a picture of Rice Lake. This is the only picture that I could find. This is in 1909, and this is all wild rice. This is a map from 1880. This is about almost, I got 2 miles, 2.5 miles long. All this is wetland around it. This was all wild rice. Probably the largest inland bed of Manoomin that was here. 7 farmers got together, petitioned the drain commissioner. They wanted to drain it so they could grow onions. It was approved, and they dug a ditch 5 miles long, 20 feet wide, and they drained the entire thing, which it blows my mind that that's even possible. It blows my mind about the fact that the tribal people depended on this for food, especially in that time in history, and you know they weren't consulted, right?
You know they knew too, because if you, even now when you're out on those beds and they're ripe, you hear everyone, you see everyone.
Yes.
We've seen each other across canoes before, and this is the first time that we're meeting, but
Yes.
you know that people are out there taking care of it.
Yes, and what's interesting, Tara, when I was at the library, I was going through folders on this lake, and I found a handwritten account from a man in his 80s. It was written, I think, in the 1970s. And he was talking, his whole story was about his memories of Rice Lake, and the very first thing he wrote about was every fall watching the Indians come and harvest the rice. And he described the whole process of harvesting to a T.
They provided ceremony for him just by being right there.
Yep. So you can go, sometimes I go to Grant, and you can drive, there's roads that go right through the middle of this, and you can see this. You can see where the lake was. It's all open muck. If you buy onions, look at the tag where they come from. If you see it from Grant, you remember this story. Michigan's onion capital. I've tried doing research to find out other lakes that were completely drained, and I have found a few more. It's really hard to find that information, but I'm really curious how prevalent it was back in those times. That's the depressing part. The good part is there's a lot of work.
That we are still
Yes.
here. That I'm very
Yes.
privileged Native woman to be able to stand in a place and call it by its first name in my language and to still hold the knowledge to look around and be able to know to do that. So we can do this. We can do this. If we can have a safe space to bring this back and take care of it, we can then, it cascades up, I promise. It's a marker for all of us.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now, of course, my book is a lot on history, so you'll hear me talking a lot more about the history, and Tara will be talking a lot more about the cultural things. But one thing that was fascinating to me is that the white duck hunters realized the duck populations were declining. Not thinking about the fact they're shooting 45,000 of them in a week hunting trip, but they blamed it on the fact the rice was gone. So everybody started planting rice all over the state. The DNR sponsored it. Even the railroads, the Chicago, Kalamazoo, and Saginaw Railroad sent guys out to plant in lakes along the railroad lines, trying to bring it back for duck hunting. Seney National Wildlife Refuge planted 33,500 pounds between 1938 and 68, but they planted it in places it didn't grow before. They planted it in boggy kind of land, and I venture to say they probably didn't consult with tribal people who knew how to do this.
Yeah,
That's part of why we have to have relationships with each other
I
to take care
often
of the
talk
earth.
about like taking care of my parents and taking them into the doctor. They've had that training. They've gone to school for all these things. They know what to call certain things. But I know my parent, I've been taking care of them for all of these times, and I sit with them all night long. So I know my parent. Let's
Yes.
get together and do this.
Yes, absolutely. The knowledge that we hold as science people is such a short term compared to the traditional ecological knowledge that is thousands of years old, right? We've moved around from our homeland. We left from another place and came here. That's been interrupted in our knowledge train. You folks have been here and you have that in you.
It's a lot
Yeah.
closer. Like I said, I'm so privileged to be here and touch the ground that my ancestors stayed on.
Yeah, and so working together, there's a lot of success working together, bringing that traditional ecological knowledge together with things that are learned in Western science and bringing the best of both to help restore some of these
Full
endangered.
picture of that, of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to move forward. And it's back to that circle teaching. We need all perspectives to look at that middle point, that middle circle, that focal point. And everybody has a front row seat, but everybody's seeing something a little bit different. We need all of those contributions to form a whole, and all of them are true.
Yes, yes. So lots of work being done in restoration by all the tribes, by state and federal government. Even some academic institutions are working on restoration. And this is an example that I'm pretty proud of that we worked on back in 2015. I was trying to get the DNR to embrace Manoomin conservation and restoration. Luckily, that fellow there from the DNR was a student and worked under me at one point in my career when I was working on an endangered butterfly. So I had a relationship with him, and he was very much for helping to do some restoration. I had a lot of my tribal friends and some non-tribal friends come to the Maple River flooding, which is just north of Lansing. You may have seen it on 127. It's that big open water marsh on both sides of the highway. And we did water ceremonies and prayed for the rice, for the Manoomin, and for the water. And then we came back and planted in the fall, and then waited till spring to see if the Manoomin decided to come and live there. And it's really always an exciting time to see if Manoomin has accepted the invitation to come back. And this is what we look for, is this beautiful floating leaf stage. We did have Manoomin come, but with Manoomin you have to keep planting every year.
The relationship you have to maintain
Yes.
and keep investing in. Like she's saying,
Yes.
made a home for her. That's exactly what we have to do. We have to make a home where she's happy, like a party cat. We have to make a space that's safe and happy for her so that she can thrive.
Yes, and we were a state government agency that could only purchase rice one time in that 1 year. So we weren't at that time able to continue planting year after year. I would go back and check every year, and for about 5 years it tried to hang on, but without having that replenishment of the seed bank that early on, it didn't succeed. But it was really the first time that we came together, state government and the tribes, in that setting. These are cultural people from different tribes, to work together. And there was an acknowledgement of this sacredness because he participated in all of the ceremony. And so that was really a great moment, I think.
There's so much to be said about making mistakes and adjustments in those relationships to move forward.
Yes.
We're working with what we have.
Yes, yes. So over all these years, it's so exciting that we were able to get the Manoomin named as a state native grain, which is going to give us a lot of opportunity to further let people know about it and educate folks. We started the Michigan Wild Rice Initiative 5 or 6 years ago. All of the tribes are members of this, as well as I think 5 or 6 state agencies, some federal agencies, some
Unrecognized.
institutional, yep, some unrecognized tribes. And we're all working together with the tribes taking the lead to work on education, identifying research needs, identifying harvesting.
How to make that happy home for her to grow in.
Exactly. With Manoomin at the forefront, how can we best help? So that's really pretty cool because there's not always been opportunities for the tribes work with the state government agencies in a joint effort. And this one, everybody's on the same page and everyone is for it. So that's a really good thing.
I think of it as like co-parenting, or when you hand your kid over at daycare, like there's just a certain way that you expect your kid to be taken care of, right? Everybody's on the same page.
Exactly.
And then we hand them over.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's pretty much wraps up the talk, but I always like to plug this. Everyone, if you would, close your eyes. If you've watched American Idol, please raise your hand. So you don't have to be embarrassed. Okay, you can open your eyes now.
Recorded though.
So do you recognize this gentleman with the check plaid shirt? He's a winner of American Idol. Taylor Hicks. Yes, so Taylor Hicks had a TV show called State Plate. And he came to Michigan. They were doing a segment on our state, and they contacted me about coming and filming wild rice, about wild rice. I told them, I'm not the person to tell the story. You have to have the tribal people tell the story. I'm happy to host you and host my tribal friends. Apparently with TV, they like you to have one character because people aren't able to attach to more than 1 or 2 people. And I said, well, sorry, I can't help you. So they caved in, and I invited my friend Kelly, Shiloh Maples, Roger Lebin to come, and they came and filmed. You can watch this on Freevee, Season 3, Episode 6, Under Michigan, and see all the processing steps that are done. It was quite an adventure.
You can see too, that's one of the teachings, that you can't do it by yourself. You're
Yes.
only here because of someone else. You can only do all of these things and be part of who you are with everyone
Yes,
contributing.
exactly.
You can't do it alone. You aren't just yourself.
Yes, that's part of the beauty of these food traditions, right? It's
Yes.
community and bringing people together and bonding as families and feeding each other,
Yes.
as well as whoever it is
Spiritually,
that's giving gifts.
holistically, nutritionally, all of it, yes.
Yeah, it's the whole package. But sometimes I have more than 1 or 2 Taylor Hicks fans in the crowd, and I always tell them that I made those white moccasins he's wearing, and they are for sale. They were on his bare feet. So if you are a super fan, see me after. The money will go toward Manoomin conservation and restoration. So that's all that I have to share. I don't know if you have anything else you would like to share, Tara, but I really am so glad that you were part of our discussion tonight, and I really honor you for your amazing work that you're doing.
Well, I'm working hard. I'm moving on things bigger than me, that's for sure. That's the only time I've ever really found my voice, because I'm very, very shy. I'm an anxious person. But when my children were born, I knew there was something that I had to protect, that flame, that I know this, and I can feel when they are happy, when they're whole, when they are themselves. And that is what I'm looking for with this. On a more spiritual level, is that we want to be able to move into a space where we can take care of this again, so that we can then in turn show you how to take care of it too, layer that story together, and she can be a grandma too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad.
Thank you,
here.
everyone.
And I
Let me go much to both Tara and Barb. If you've got questions, please let us know. Again, we are live streaming this, so I am going to repeat your questions just to make sure that everyone who's watching will be able to hear them as well. But, so what questions do you have? Okay. So just for the people at home, the question is, what can the neighborhood people here help to help the tribe with the quest for helping?
The neighborhood people here will be 1836 territories, which we grassroots watch over, help each other watch our homes and our gardens. But to be cognizant, be aware, be careful of these beds. And let somebody know if you know somebody, or call the tribal NRD. Let them know, I think there's rice out here.
I'd also like to add, if I might, that the education piece is so important. You know more than most of the people in the general public right now about wild rice, about Manoomin, because you attended this talk and listened to what Tara and I had to share. There's many people who live on lakes who have, some of them have Manoomin on them, and they don't understand that Manoomin is not a weed. They think it's a weed. And they want to put chemicals in the water and apply for permits from Eagle to eradicate it. So,
Or they don't live on their home and rent it
Yes.
out and have no investment in that space. And how it
Yes.
is.
So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to educate the non-tribal world, non-tribal people, people who live on lakes that have Manoomin or in the rivers, about how important this plant is. Not saying other plants aren't, but this is a sacred being. And helping people understand and look at it in a different way will help to protect it. So I just wanted to add that because that's not something that's often spoken about.
We almost think of an ecological cycle, the opposite of what is taught, like that keystone species is usually a predator. This is our keystone relationship, us with this Manoomin. When that's healthy, we'll have a healthy ecosystem.
It's an old wash tub, and you have to do things to it before you use it for parching to get the coating off of it. So it's just an old wash tub you buy in an antique store.
Galvanized metal, or we have one that we use for ceremony, that first parching of the rice, that's copper. I say we shall find out.
I
If
don't
there was,
know.
we'll find out.
So the question was, here in Traverse City at the library, Boardman Lake is directly behind the library. And so the question was about Boardman Lake and what it looked like before the logging industry came, because there was a dam put in and a skid for the logging industry.
I don't have my map memorized anymore about locations of Manoomin near here, but if there is Manoomin located in that river anywhere, then chances are likely there was Manoomin there. That would be my educated guess.
And I'm grassroots, so I'm not going to tell you one way or the other where that Manoomin is, if it's not growing. But more than likely, the places that you'll see settlements for, we were articulating spaces for this to grow so that we could stay there.
Okay, I mean, I can say I live in the Boardman, I live on the Ottawa River. And I have the river, very well.
you go first on that one?
So the question was, what can an individual do if they are living on a waterway such as Boardman River, which is formerly known as Ottawa River, and what types of things could be planted that would help facilitate some of this?
If there are precursors to this rice, I'm not sure what they are. This is our marker for this. I refer to it as a she just because a she is mostly who taught me the spiritual side of this, but it is a two-spirit plant because it has both the flower and the grain. Is a whole medicine person like that. They can see both sides of the perspective, both sides of the wheel. You can't really plant it unless you can get it. And it's restricted as far as who buys the plant, the seeding for it.
Yeah, it's I don't want to say it's complicated. There's many things you have to think about when you try to plant Manoomin. As she said, you should find sources that are near where it's going to be planted. But as I said, river rice is a state threatened species. So it's illegal for you to go out and get seed from any river rice that you see. Also, the conditions have to be right. Not every place is a good place for Manoomin to grow. The water might be too deep. It might be too fast of a river. The sediment might not be the right kind. You might have an overabundance of carp, which is, carp love Manoomin, and you wouldn't be successful. You may have neighbors who would be really mad if you planted Manoomin and it starts to grow really thick and they can't get their boats down the river. So when I do talks, this is just my own personal thing, is I say to contact the tribe nearest to you and ask how you can be supportive of projects that they may be doing or ways that you can support their restoration work.
Like the land is different everywhere and every relationship
Yeah.
is different. We're all working to come back to our space, and that's going to be a little bit different depending on where it is because the land is all different.
Yes, yes. And with the ponds, a lot of people ask that. I have a pond. When you are working with Lake Manoomin, you need to have a flow of water. It has to have an inflow and an outflow, a stream coming in, a stream going out. So there's a lot of things to consider. And I also think the ceremonying is a very important part of the inviting Manoomin to come back to somewhere as well.
As a white person, I don't want to fetishize or appropriate one way or respectfully. Is it welcome?
Thank you. Those are the right steps. Yes. And that's how we learn, is at the elbows.
I'll let Tara answer that question. I can tell you perspective, experience too.
I am all about all hands on deck. Like we need everybody on board, but we all need to be doing our special part of that. As Indigenous people, 80% of the world's biodiversity is in our hands. We've been doing all right. We just need to step back into that role to be able to take care of this in a good way. That being said, it's going to look a little bit different. We're trying to reclaim and replant a couple different places, so those would be sensitive, and those are for Indigenous hands only right now. So those places are very sensitive, and there are places that have beds that have overlapped tribal territories and things too, so they're shared spaces. So all of these are very interrelational questions that are very specific to this case.
Yes. And the rice beds are protected. People are very protective of Manoomin beds right now as they're working on restoration for a variety of reasons. my recommendation is sometimes, like Keweenaw Bay Indian Community up in Baraga in the UP, they have a rice camp in Labor Day weekend that's open to everyone. And they teach how to do the processing. As far as I know, most of the other tribes, their rice camps are not open to everyone. That's for their communities. To be respectful of that, my suggestion as a white person is you wait for an invitation and work with non-native people to help put your energies that way. Work with the DNR or the Forest Service. Sometimes the National Forests have projects that you could be helpful with. But there's not a lot of physical work involved when you plant Manoomin. It's basically you go out in the canoe after you've gotten the seed and plant it. There's no preparation of beds or things that you might find if you're doing like a prairie restoration, right? But it's all...
That's one of the beautiful things about this plant is, and one of the sad things too is the passenger pigeon is gone. She traveled with 13 different seeds. This was one of them. So she helped that travel with that biodiversity. We have to come in as that passenger pigeon to be able to carry these seeds now.
Yeah.
But we have to articulate a space that is wildly different than the last time we took care of this. So it might take a minute.
Yeah. And you always want to put it someplace that you are fairly confident in, rather than just, I know some people, and years ago, they'd drive home from ice camp and throw it in every bit of water they could find. And to me, that's wasting this beautiful life. Each seed is a plant, a potential life, right? So it has to be respected in that way.
It's talked to like a baby. It is an animate spirit, even just energy-wise or commodity-wise. That has been touched at least 4 times and loved 4 times by human hands, at least by the time you consume it. So
it's kind of a complicated thing, different than a lot of other kind of restoration at this point in time. And that's my encouragement is always just work on educating yourself and other people right now. And when the invitation comes, be there to answer the call. That's kind of my suggestion to non-tribal people.
now, and watch your space. Have a relationship with your space. See how she's changing and different, so that if there is a chance for us to step in and maybe utilize that space together, you'll know how to respond to it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anything else? Okay. All right, Miigwech, for you for coming and to our presenters as well. Thank
Thank
you.
you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you
For
guys for
hosting.
being here. Yes.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
No, not here at the library. No reason to be nervous at the library, ever. How is Jamie doing?
He's doing good. He's getting ready to go to the residency Friday. Go drop him off in his cat.
Where's the residency?
Vicksburg.
Oh, Virginia. Wow. Okay, great. I was just interacting with Daniel today from Crosshatch, who came and picked up some native seeds from us at the seed library for Jamie's
Very cool.
project that's happening over there. So
Did you see his zine?
no. Oh yes, I
Okay.
did. I just got 2 copies dropped off this afternoon.
Good.
And I'm gonna sit down with it. Yeah, the